became good friends over time. Seeking retribution, we are faithful to the end. We're gonna cross that line.
Hello and welcome. This is WTF, the West Tigers Faithful Podcast. We are back for our sophomore episode for a wrap of round 12 and some other things that we'd like to touch on in the wake of the bye week. I am here with Mr. Joe McCord. How are you, mate?
Excellent, mate. Aside from the fact that I have some sort of seasonal flu of some kind, so forgive the voice, but I'm pumped. I'm pumped up to the eyeballs on pseudoephedrine, so I'm ready to go.
Yeah, very good. Quick thank you to everybody who gave us a crack on first listen. Hopefully you're back again. For those who are not, I know you're not listening, but thank you anyway for showing some support. For the most part, we know the West Tigers podcast market is pretty inflated, but hey, we're keen to keep going again. We haven't been cancelled yet, so we may as well continue, Mac?
No, we'll do our best to get cancelled this week, though. I think plenty to talk about, so it might go off the rails a bit.
Well, I want to pose you a question straight away. Obviously, Benjamin Quentin Marshall is the head coach of the West Tigers, but I suppose the first question to you is, what is this bloke's annual leave loading? Has he got more holidays than the average head coach?
Yeah, I guess he must have negotiated some pretty good terms, and he's in his contract with Sheensy. Might be why Sheensy ran off on us so quick before it got revealed, but certainly seems like it. Yeah, getting a nice break halfway through the season.
Well, if I know Benji Marshall will be working on his handicap and his tan, I don't think there'll be too much thinking about what's going on back at Concord at the moment. But there's two ways to look at it, I find. There's the James Graham angle, which is this is a terrible look and he needs to be working hard to find solutions. And then there's the other one where it's like, take a deep breath, clear your mind, start again. What side of the argument are you on?
Yeah, look, I can see both perspectives. I think that it makes sense for a young coach with a young team who wants to do things his way to, maybe kind of have that more millennial managerial approach. But at the same time, it is his first season and we are going poor and optics are a thing. And perception is reality. Making decisions like this is a way to, encourage the naysayers and give them more ammunition, which is maybe not a good thing. I just hope that maybe he's taken the Andrew Johns, Brad Fittler approach to his Fiji golf trips, and he's going to hire, the guy who picks up his bags to maybe come.
Eto Nabuli.
Find us an Eto Nabuli, and because we need ourselves a nice Fijian winger. The last decent Fijian winger we had, we didn't do a good job in bringing him through, and he ended up a superstar dual code international. So maybe Benji can make good and bring us back a new one.
Open quote, I can't believe the Tigers let him go, close quote.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way it always goes. Look, I see both sides of it. Ideally, I'd still have him here, but at the same time, if he can start fresh, sort of take a deep breath and look at it from a long lens, then, maybe that will help us. I'm not too sure. I feel like the Tigers, despite the fact that Origin has really kicked into gear, they're just not far away from the news at the moment. Mate, Buzz Rothfield hates us at the moment, doesn't he?
Buzz will just say what he knows that the boomers at the pub are talking about, so that he can get that reaction of yeah, Buzz, you know what you're talking about, mate. That's all he's into. I don't even think he has an opinion that's his own. His opinions are the distilled football opinion of any wino that you could find at a pub, I reckon.
Well, I guess the big question, besides obviously what sort of contract Benji sort of negotiated for himself, is the fact that Richo's in England as well. So are the doors of the Centre of Excellence, are they locked of an evening? Who's taking care of that at the moment? Do we trust Robbie Farrett to lock up that facility, given how prestigious it is, and given with the way our attack's going? Is that a person you want to entrust with the keys to the Centre of Excellence?
I don't think that they could lock it because how else are the boys going to get their haircuts?
Which I think Stafford Tower is doing at the moment. I think he's pretty much the in-house barber.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting to know. How about the next saga of Tigers getting suspended for hip drops while other teams get off on it? It's seems to be a bit of a recurring theme. 3 weeks for Clemmer. Didn't even get penalised on the field.
No.
Val Holmes gets off, even though Papa Lee is going to be out for a month. The funny thing about that one, I reckon, though, is that if you look carefully, I think Isaiah was hip dropped by 2 Queenslanders.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah, Dearden. I think Dearden was the one that actually like left his feet and actually caused the hip drop, tripped over Holmes. Holmes made the contact. It's all good. So no worries.
I'm not going to use the word conspiracy, but Townsville is the Bermuda Triangle to the West Tigers.
Seems like it.
Ever since approximately 2022. So I'm going to blame Tim Sheens for that.
I feel like we used to have a good run up there. Like I remember back in the day, we used to do all right up in Townsville.
The last 3 visits we've now had. Well, the first one was obviously the soft whistle in 2022, which was just the worst of the bunch, where litigious Lee Hadjipantelis threatened the NRL with legal action, and sure enough, the toothless tiger did not do anything. Last year was a 74-0 drubbing, which was the worst performance I've ever seen by an NRL team, and the scoreline was a reflection of that. And we're lucky that if it was, I think it was the highest margin since like the 1930s when there was 3-point tries. And then this week we've had Clemmer that's been done for a hip drop for 3 weeks, and then at 20-16. And look, we didn't deserve to win the game, but at 20-16. Josh Folletti is blatantly shoulder charged. It's ruled a knock on, and the Cowboys go down the field to score. There is something going on at Townsville. Maybe it's the new stadium. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe the boys haven't been to the Mad Cow as many times as they're supposed to before or after.
Or too many times.
That too. I don't know what's going on. We are cursed up there. But look, let's get into the Cowboys review. And we were down 20-0, I believe, after about 16 or 17 minutes. I don't even know why the Cowboys took the 2 at 12-0. That was a weird show of respect that is seldom seen in West Tigers games. There was some solid individual performances, but my biggest takeaway was the fact that we are just getting killed by opposition teams when we're working the ball out away from our goal line. We just do not have outside backs that can bend the line, find their front, get quick play the balls away, and average 10 or so meters a carry. It's and with no Justin Olam, it was made to be even worse. And Sania Taruva will help, and Luke Lauliti probably isn't far off first grade. And you've got some other guys in and around the traps, but how do you fix it immediately? Is where I'm going here. Is there anybody that
Charlie
bring in that's NRL ready that can bend the line?
Yeah. We saw him. His name's Alex Lobb. It's literally the only thing he's good at aside from catching high balls. Alex, you saw the week before last, I think in New South Wales Cup, he put up 200 meters on 12 carries.
Which we thought was a glitch, but you're right. To Alex's credit, for those who don't really know Alex before he debuted, he's a big, rangy outside back. He's not super quick, but when he strides out, he's got a bit of toe. He is amazing in the air. He is like nothing you've ever seen. He's almost on a level of, say, Xavier Coates. He can goal kick, and there's a bit of cult hero value about him, bit of Luke Cavell, bit of Pat Richards, but the Lobster of late has been really, really good out of yardage, and I think he proved that. Obviously, Stainsy has been struggling, and we'll get to that because obviously he's been sort of quoted as being shopped around. But Alex Lobb's only one person, and that's a play one. Alamalo's okay. He's all right, but at the same time, he had a pretty shaky game. Sania Taruva's coming into the side, and Justin is back this week, or next week. But
I just think
it feels like it needs an entire overhaul.
Yeah, I know it sounds strange. Kind of two things. I actually wrote a fairly long brain dump about this exact issue, with an intention of dumping it in the Discord, but then I just didn't. the biggest issue is Staines, because Staines has a willingness to take the first hit up that he shouldn't have. So he actually puts himself, he'll like push people out of the way to get in there. Like
Yeah.
which is to his credit, but it sets us back.
Yeah.
The second issue is that we really shouldn't be seeing back carries in those sets coming out of trouble. The reason that we see that is because the forwards are not getting themselves back on side and taking those carries, which is just I don't understand why. Like I understand that, you know, there's a certain, you know, if a forward's, you know, been down the field defending and the opposition pin us in the corner, it's going to take some time to get back down there. But there needs to be like a tactical decision in the side for one forward to make it a point of like getting themselves back on side. If our defensive set was focused in the middle, then there needs to be like a key for like one of the edge back rowers to be like, oh, I'm not actually going to be needed to be defending that much this set. I know I'm going to have to hustle and get down there. Like they need to be thinking ahead of time, because what we'll see is like occasionally a Stefano or a Pole or whatever will actually get down there and take that second tackle hit up or that third tackle hit up, and it changes the whole momentum of the set. Like it changes the whole momentum of the set. They'll hit it straight up the ruck, even though they pinned us. They'll get that 10 meters. The difference between 6 and 10 meters on that carry is like basically a whole line having to take 3 further steps backwards, which means that the next carry, they're not being met at the line of like, you know, at the ruck. They're actually meeting them like where they want to meet them, and everything rolls off from it. But look, and the other thing I think is like it really just highlights that I think we as a fan base were really underestimating Junior Tupou's contributions to the team when he was here. We have not won a game since he went down.
That's a big thing too, and he was amazing out of yardage. You're right. He was massively important. Speaking of yardage and meters, and it's a game of inches and all these other cliches, I think our kickoffs are too short, and that's And Junior Tupou was our kickoff taker, but you know I'm seeing you know the Cowboys taking that ball 5 meters out from their line when they should be taking it 5 meters from their dead ball line, and then taking the ball nearly to or beyond the 20. That's not good enough at NRL level. And additionally, at the moment, we don't have a halfback, and I think this includes Aiden Caesar, that can put a ball in the 10x10 box, or better yet, the 5x5 box. Jerome Luai, who I was worried about playing halfback, can do that. And that's really, really exciting. He showed that against Cronulla. But again, like for this year, mainly, and we'll get to 2025 in a little bit, but at the moment, it's just killing us in terms of field position, because sometimes it's like teams have dropout sets against us where we go 15 to 20 meters off a yardage set. Sullivan will put the ball downfield. It'll land 20 out and 20 in from the opposition's line, and they'll make as many meters as they can on play zero, and suddenly, you know, they're 65 meters away from our line, which is a massive problem, and that builds pressure again, and they can put attacking kicks in, and that puts, you know, it happened to Jareen Buller with that try to Jeremiah Nanai. You know, these are real and pressing issues, and Marshall needs to assess them. It's very, very basic, but it would be enough to stem the flow of points and build a bit more resilience, you know, in terms of just kicking a bit longer on kickoffs and general play and so forth. I know our yardage game is no good, but something like that could mitigate those issues a little bit. But
I agree, and it was a problem last year too. Like it was something that like I recognized midway point of last year. It was like there's more than one way to win the field position battle. It's not just about getting yourself out of trouble. It's not getting yourself into trouble. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Look, let's focus on the players that came in a little bit. Declan Casey, as mentioned, is still cursed at first grade level. That curse and that hex extends to first grade. Poor bastard dropped the ball 3 times and put us under unnecessary pressure or relieved pressure for the Cowboys. Given times, Josh Folletti, I was pleasantly surprised with. I get worried because he is a small body and he is a bit of a legs tackler, and that led to the first try for Felt. Going low. It allowed Vilea to get the offload away, and and felt then scored in the corner. But for the most part, I thought he didn't look out of place, which is exciting for a 19-year-old. In saying that, there is some work to do, and there's also some players. Obviously, Justin Olam is first choice, but you've also got a guy like Hiamasi Makasini breathing down his neck. Where do you, after watching that game, and one game does not judge a career. He obviously exceeded our expectations, but where are you at now with Josh?
I would probably say week to week, he's kept his spot for the next game. That's probably all I could say. He's gonna, if it's going to be hard to not pick him because every alternative option has demonstrated themselves as a liability now.
Yeah.
Like Naden is a liability, Casey is a liability. Like, who else do we have? Toa's out for probably the whole
Tara and
season.
Tupo are out. Who are two of your other options?
So, I think Folletti's going to have a huge opportunity to just develop. And you are right, he did exceed my expectations. I thought Casey would outplay him. I underestimated how cursed of a guy that Casey is. Casey has solidly outplayed Folletti every week in New South Wales Cup.
Yes.
But he just seems to be one of those guys that when he makes a step up to the NRL, he must just have like a nerves problem or something because he can't handle the heat of that level of footy. Whereas Folletti seemed like he might be one of those guys that does the opposite, where he actually performs better in that situation.
Yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me because he obviously has been a classy player coming through, highly regarded, played lots of rep games. And I do think last year, the best game he played all season was that New South Wales versus Queensland game where he was on the opposite edge to Strange. Was that last year or the year before? I can't remember. But
yeah, that was last year, correct. And Latu finally played right edge. Yes,
yeah.
And you're right. Nathan Ferguson and Nathan Strange ran right on the right edge.
Yeah, so that game was probably his best game, and it was the biggest game of the season for him. So he might just be that kind of dude. Your issues with him are totally valid. Like he's young, he's going to have his problems. It's not like he's competing with rep stars for the spot. So I would persevere with him on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, I think so too. Bit of impact from the bench that actually gave us a bit of width and structure. Fanua Bolle actually threw the pass that led to Alamalo's first try. Shout out Scott Drinkwater. That was the worst defensive effort I've ever seen from a fullback. He phoned that in. But Justin Matamua, I felt, gave us a really genuine passing option that put players into two minds and through that middle corridor. I think we have to persist with him. And quite frankly, I think we have to start with him. Why did Marshall move him to the bench again?
Yeah, very questionable decision. I don't know. I remember when I saw that in the pregame, I was like, why? It's not as though the Cowboys are a team that have been, defined by toughness and grittiness.
No.
But at the same time, they did blow us away early. So, would that have got even worse if we had the less experienced guy on the field? I don't know. Maybe there was a method to the madness, but I agree with you. I think he's proven now that much like Folletti, again, it's not like he's competing with rep stars for the spot. And he was one of the better players on the field on the day. So, I would put him in the same bucket as Folletti. He's got his spot. You persevere with him on a week-to-week basis. I again, just like Folletti, it'd probably take a fair bit of negative performances back to back for me to unseat him now.
I hear that. Somebody who has been amazing to the point where we've actually rethought our back row depth chart, and we've obviously said goodbye to Isaiah Papali'i as a result, is Samuel Afinu. The combination that he has formed with Lachlan Galvin that was not formed in preseason has me licking my lips for what I hope will be a very fruitful combination for the next 10 or 15 years. We don't deserve that kid. How hard he works and how talented he is. How on earth did Mario Tartak think that his best option was to go to West Tigers? I am so grateful, but at the same time, wow, what a player.
Yeah, there's got to be more to the story of what happened with the Fino family in Manly. There just has to be something that happened there to really sour it because, yeah, I know everybody was thinking Latu was the one we were really going for, but like Samuel has been, it would be probably not even like a stretch to say he's been our best player this year.
I don't think so either. I had some worries about him in regards to his contact through the middle, mainly defensively. He put those to bed in the early rounds, and he was amazing for us to begin with in that middle forward role to the point where I think we've missed him through the middle.
Agreed. It's like we wish we had two of him now.
Yeah, that's right. But on an edge, he's just been sensational. And look, there may be two of them because with Clemmer now suspended for 3 weeks, Sione gets an opportunity for a bit of an extended period in grade. Two players that did come under the spotlight for us last week were Jareem Buller and Lachlan Galvin. I felt as if the try that Jareem scored showed plenty of urgency. I think that's something that we've wanted from him for a long time, and I think that's something you can clip up, and Benji Marshall can say to him, mate, that's what we need from you. That's it. It's as simple as that. And every game's a learning experience for those two boys, but Lachlan, I think, while he did create points, I think he was still a mixed bag. There was a couple of 7 tackle sets he gave away. There was a time where I understand if you run the ball dead, we not dead, but if you run the ball on last and you just get tackled, then that's better than giving away a 7 tackle set and kicking the ball dead. But at the same time, it is a learning experience and we need to be patient with them. But for the most part, I saw enough to think that they probably don't need that time in cup that we were suggesting a little while ago. Do you agree?
I mean, even if they do, we're not a squad that can afford to drop them. Like, who are we going to replace them with? Like Declan Casey is playing 5/8 the New South Wales Cup this week.
Yeah, well,
we don't have anybody to replace them with, even if they did. I don't know. I wouldn't if we like say we were Penrith or we were the Broncos where we just like were overflowing with talent. I would probably still be playing somebody like Lachlan Galvin in the NRL every week, but I would be moving him around a bit. Like I would probably have him on the bench, coming on to like play some minutes in the middle, on the edge, get a feel for the game more like holistically, especially because of his utility value.
Yeah.
But we're not those clubs. We don't have the capacity to really do that. Like he's our best option at 6, so he plays there. Bula, he was really improved. I have to give him credit. What I need to see from Jareem Bula is aggression. And as you rightly pointed out, like when he like attacked that kick, that was aggressive. I want to see aggression. I think he plays his best football when he's aggressive. I think, like as you said last year, his best games and his best moments came from aggressively attacking the ball defensively.
Yes.
He needs to just be aggressive. I saw a shift of mentality in him. I saw more passion. I liked the way he celebrated that try. I liked, the fact that the team really like rose around him. They're looking at Buller. Like the team are looking at Buller and going, you need to pull us along. You're our guy. So he needs to be that guy.
And that's hard to learn being a rookie. That's really, really hard, all that expectation and so forth, and being a pivotal member of the squad. But he will learn that and he'll be better for that in the long run. But yeah, like you said, like when that kick went up, everybody's looking at Galvin going, oh my God, he's offside. But the way that Jareem Buller, like normally he glides and, it's very majestic the way that he runs.
Yeah, he was
bolted to that football. Like he was booking. Like it was awesome. So look, hopefully that continues. And if that does continue, then that's good news for West Tigers. But again, this is a learning curve for Jareem, and he's still 12 months off, really hitting the 50 games and everything like that.
We are going to actually flog the Cowboys stupid at Leichhardt later this year. Like you realize that, like, they put 70 on us in North Queensland last year. We put 60 on them at Leichhardt. They only beat us by like a couple of tries this time. We're going to beat them by 100. It's going to be 100-0.
Yeah, we'll win it back on aggregate. Anything else you want to touch on from the Cowboys game, or have we sort of
briefly? Yeah, probably Clemmer. I think Clemmer is really showing the signs that he's probably a bench forward at best at this point in his career. I think like the week in, week out grind of being the like linchpin starting prop is making his effectiveness lesser. The same thing happened last year, and it's happening earlier in the year this year. I think he's a bench prop. He still has a role to play. He's still a decent NRL level prop, but he's not a lit forward leader, and I think his future lies off the bench.
Well, we'll talk about his long-term future in a second, because what I want to do with this mid-year buy, and I think this might be something that we can probably do year on year, once again, providing we don't get cancelled, is do a deep dive for the squad the year after. So having a look at who's coming in both internally and externally, having a look at anybody that's being shopped around, that's obviously in the news, and sort of have a bit of an idea and a plan of, what we could look at that's potentially, off contract in terms of players, or some players that may be stuck behind others that are looking for opportunities. So with that in mind, and with what we understand, listeners, up until last week, West Tigers had 29 contracted players for their top 30 for 2025. Now, we know this because Shane Richardson came out and said when everything was going on with Adam Dewey that we only had one spot left on the roster. I'm going to assume, given that there are 3 players with options, Brandon Tumeth, Aiden Caesar, and Stefano Utoikamanu, that it is the latter two. So Caesar and Stefano are likely the two that are that are staying around for next year. That number obviously changed to 28 with Isaiah Papali'i heading for the exits and signing a 3-year deal with Penrith commencing from 2025. Mac, we obviously touched on it. Obviously, he, it just hasn't worked out. He's been a good player for us, but he hasn't been the player that played to his salary and his expectation, I think we can say. But obviously, at the same time, Luke Brooks and Aiden Caesar, they're not Mitchell Moses, and they just couldn't get the same sort of impact out of him. Now that it is official and he is out of the way, how are you feeling?
I don't, again, I think same as I said last week, I'm not really bothered. I think Papali'i is the sort of guy that, he might go to Penrith and be Parramatta version. He probably will be. I think that the smart money is that he will be. But he's not that here. He's not that kind of player. He's the kind of player, we got the Warriors version. Penrith might get the Para version. He plays to the supporting cast. He's a win more type is what I call them. And for a squad like ours, I look at the squad, and what we're missing are the Griffin Neem types. We're missing the guys you can get, maybe 80% of Papali's value out of on 40% of his contract.
Yeah.
And maybe you get 2 of them and you get 160% of Papali's value for the same money with 2 bodies. That's how I look at it.
That is a good way to look at it. Now, with that in mind, it also came to light that Shane Richardson was in the UK on a sign and sell mission. We do not know yet who he is potentially signing. I've got a couple of ideas, but I'll outlay those in a little bit. But the players that have been mentioned across the Morning Herald and the Telegraph and NRL 360 are as follows: John Bateman, Jaden Sullivan, Brent Naden, Charlie Staines, and David Clemmer. There are 5 of them. What I'd like to do, Mac, now is assess their contracts. We'll do these individually. The feasibility and whether or not they'll be sold to English or Aussie clubs, and some potential replacements to look at as well. First off, I want to start with Jaden, or Bud Sullivan, who is contracted, I believe, until the end of 2027. As far as I'm aware, there are no options in that deal. And he's on approximately $500,000 until his contract expires. Now, with the logjam of halves that we currently have, it was always going to be a matter of time until Bud was sold. But obviously, some performances that left a few supporters and the coaching staff wanting has led to his sale being brought on a little quicker than anticipated. How are you feeling about Jaden being sold? And, do you think Richo will be able to offload him to an English club? And furthermore, do you think Jaden would want to go overseas?
I won't pretend to know what he's thinking. I don't know him at all. There was the homesickness rumor I take things like that with a grain of salt myself. Look, I would, out of the five names you mentioned, he would be the last on my list of moving, just because, like, I think that what he brings, even though he's underperformed, yes, even though his contract doesn't look like it's, value for money, his position and what he brings is the hardest thing to find in the NRL. And we have really, really minimal halves depth at the club. Latu Fainu is a rookie and he's constantly injured. Yes, we're bringing Jerome Luai to the club next year. Aiden Caesar's off contract. I think he has a mutual option actually.
Yes.
But I digress. I've seen glimmers in Sullivan, and he also seems like the sort of guy who the level at which he will perform has everything to do with how much he feels belief in himself and how much he feels like other people believe in him. He strikes me as that kind of guy, like that you need to get around him and pump him up. Like his name being mentioned now as though he's being shopped around after just a few weeks of being with the club, after struggling, losing his spot so quickly in the season. Like I feel like, there's a very good chance that Sullivan's the kind of guy that if we did let him go and he went to England and he performed well, he'd come back as a 26-year-old and he'd be one of the best players in the NRL. Like that's the sort of thing I would not be surprised to see. His game, I had him pegged wrong. I thought that he was going to be like a Scott Prince style halfback. And, that's, maybe I'm an idiot. Maybe I just think he looks like him. And I thought that like I could manifest that into reality. But he does, but he does have some real good qualities. Kicking game is not one of them. Like a field generalship is not one of them. He looks like he would be a good six outside of a good organizing seven. And he looks like I think he might be a pretty good hooker, like a Jeremy Marshall King style hooker. And there's value to get from him. The other guys on the list, I don't particularly have even remote issues with them going.
Okay. Well, there's one particular player that I would prefer we keep, but he seems to be the one that's the most logical to get rid of, and that's John Bateman. So end of 2026, he's on approximately $600,000 a season until then. I think it's fairly certain that John hasn't set the world alight and hasn't lived up to expectation. He's had some good games, don't get me wrong, but he's also had some games where discipline and stupidity has let him down. He's also just wanted sometimes to just punch on with his opposite. Case in point, Hudson Young in round 2. But I think that John is a good culture guy. For the most part, I think he fucking hates losing. He's going to drive standards all day long, and he knows what success looks like at a domestic and international level. And he's been in a lot of good systems. Look, I think people see the fact that John is English, and and that he is always in England over preseason and whatever it may be. But he is a guy that I would prefer to hold on to. But at the same time, I understand where people are coming from because he's just not playing to his output, similar to what Isaiah is. So I understand that angle as well. But there is also the personal angle, which is something that probably needs to be weighed up amongst all of them. John has an Australian partner and has a child to that partner. Congratulations to John. I think the little one's only a couple of years old. And as a result, that might actually affect whether or not he'll be able to go to England. Now, I'm not saying that he's there or, that he's going to go or he isn't, but let's say hypothetically that we were to lose or to sell John Bateman, and then you lose Isaiah Papali'i as well. What edge forwards do we think can do a job for us that are readily available? Who are you looking at?
There's some obvious ones. The obvious ones aren't the ones that I really look at. Satili Tupanua, he's been told that he can go elsewhere by the Roosters. Angus Crichton's off contract. Luke Garner has been thrown around by a lot of Tigers fans as an option. Penrith have just signed Papali'i, which means that Garner's probably not going to be there next year.
Yeah,
those aren't really where I would go though. I would be more looking at underrated guys that clubs that are performing well. Somebody who I really like the look of is Jack Williams at the Sharks.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
off contract. He's played over 100 games. He's come from a Sharks team that like a forwards dominant team. Their forwards perform well. He knows what it takes. He won't be like marquee money guy either.
Oh,
Um,
mid-range.
then there's guys like somebody like Brody Jones at the Knights who, I don't watch the Knights that much, but every time they play us, he seems to carve us to pieces.
There's a lot of players like that, but Brody is a goer, definitely, and he is a player that he's stuck behind, the likes of Pierce Paul and Frizzell and Dylan Lucas. So I guess that's feasible as well.
Yeah, that's what I look at. Like I look at it and I go, are we a club that needs more value for money signings that can like just shut up and get the job done, or do we need to replace Bateman with Crichton? Do we need to just go, let's just replace Bateman, who wasn't a good marquee guy, with another marquee guy and Crichton? And I look at that and I go, it's very likely Crichton comes into the club and he does the same thing, because it just seems to be what marquee guys do at our club. They come there on big money and then they just underperform, and then we get rid of them and we end up paying half their freight to go play elsewhere. I'd rather just go for some solid dudes.
Good call. And keep in mind as well that Angus is more than likely to stay at the Roosters and probably wouldn't even factor us into his considerations. So that's a really, really good point. So that's sort of edge players. One player that does come up in conversation a little bit around the traps is Ewan Aitken, obviously a New South Wales native who's off contract this year, and it feels like the Dolphins have 1,000 outside backs and edge forwards. Look, I think he'd probably be more likely to follow Wayne to South, but is it worth having a conversation with him and having a look at him, to possibly start on an edge or to be that jersey 17 guy? What do you think?
I wouldn't hate it. Like if we signed him, I don't know if I like am as into the idea as, some of the other guys on the Discord have been like, filleting him. But like for me, I think Aitken is somebody who is probably the best player that he will be right now. Like he's at that sort of career like apex where I can't see him getting any better. I can certainly see him getting worse, especially at a club like ours. But he does have that utility value. Yeah, like he's a good player. Like I wouldn't mind it.
The question is defensively around him and always has been. So I'm not too sure. Two outside backs that have made up our right edge for the majority of the year, Brent Naden and Charlie Staines. Both of these guys, I think, would be assets to English clubs. I know that Brent has his issues with his discipline and he's a little bit erratic. And I know that Charlie, obviously, right now is just not an NRL caliber winger that can really work you out of yardage. But both of those guys could foreseeably start at fullback. Brent could play anywhere 1 to 7 at a high click in the Super League, I think, just because he's a natural footballer. That style of football, really, really rewards players like that. These guys, they're both on around 250 to 300K. Their contracts expire end of next year. I don't think we're going to have too much issue offloading them. Do you feel the same?
Yep. Yeah. No, I think I actually think Charlie would probably get picked up by most NRL clubs.
Yeah, I think that there's probably an avenue to go back to Penrith now that Taylor May obviously has he's now stood down till March or May next year, I believe, and Sani is obviously coming to us, and I don't know if Jesse McLean is NRL ready. I don't think he's ready to start on a wing, and while Charlie is, for us, he's our play one winger out of yardage. He's probably 2 or 3 at Penrith behind Bizza and Isaac Tago. So maybe that is a foreseeable route. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think we're going to have too much issue shopping them. The last one that I do have that was rumoured by Buzz in his Sunday column was somebody who you touched on, and that's Dave Clemmer. And you sort of said his short-term future probably lies on the bench at West Tigers, but does his medium-term future lie on the bench at West Tigers, do you think? Do we keep him or do we cut our losses and try and sell him off?
I'd be very surprised if we're able to get rid of him without paying a lot of freight. Like a lot. I think he's on 800K minimum at the moment. I would be surprised if like another club would be willing to pay more than 400K for what he's delivering. So would we want to, pay him 800K to play on the bench, or do we want to pay him 400K so that we can sign somebody else? It's tough.
It
It's
is.
tough. It's a really look. I think you're probably at this point. I would. You want Richo to be trying to find a club that's willing to do a deal that's beneficial to us. I don't think it'll work out, and because of that, I think we're probably going to be stuck with him at least until next year. But if Richo can work miracles and we can get away with maybe only paying 200K, 250K, then yeah, go for it.
Nice. And I think a player that I would like to replace him with, I mean, I still think Jordan Miller's a little while off, and I know you differ in that opinion, but I don't think, and we're going to get to the development players in a little bit, I don't think any of them are ready to foreseeably come into the 17. The player that I really like is a fella at Canberra at the moment who ended up there via Townsville, is Peter Holler.
Oh, yeah.
He was their State Cup Player of the Year last year, and averages around 150 meters a game in Cup. He came up this week against the Chooks, albeit in a beaten side, but took 6 hit ups for 60 meters and made 15 to 20 tackles for no missed, which is really impressive. I think he's somebody that's low risk, low cost, and could do a job for us. But going back to Naden and Staines, we're probably going to have to replace them. And look, Luke Lauliti's coming into the top 30, Solo Sakuru's coming into the top 30, but I think we probably need to have a look at some other players at other clubs. Guys on my list, Jarrell Skelton and Blake Wilson are two players that are stuck behind a plethora of outside backs at the Dogs. I'll be looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
Guy that did come on my radar, and I'll shout it down simply because he was just dropped, was Michaeli Ravalawa at the Dragons. He's playing State Cup this week. I think that'd be worth an inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I know you've got a couple of names on your list. Who are you looking at?
Yeah, I think one guy I really, really want us to go after is Remus Smith. I think Remus Smith is really underrated, and I actually think he's playing better this year than I've ever seen him play before. And he's off contract, so maybe that's why. But the Storm they're not going to get into a bidding war over Remus. They won't offer him. They won't offer him what we would be willing to offer him. He can play wing or center. He's at a perfect age with a perfect number of games where he'd come into our side and, Olam and Smith, they were, Melbourne center pairing for a while and successful. I think Remus Smith, another one I'd probably have a look at is Anari Tuala. I don't know whether you would think Newcastle will re-sign him, but I think he's a little bit underrated. I think that he's better than what we've got on the wing. He's not like a superstar of the game, but I think at this point in time, as a club, we shouldn't be really looking at signing superstars. We should be looking at signing guys that are going to give you above average output and developing superstars from within. I think that's how we dig our way out. And we're doing that. We've got superstars like Galvin emerging and Samuel Afainu emerging. I think we need to sign less, Ravalawa would be good. I think he would be a good signing. He doesn't strike me as the sort of dude that would come to the club and kind of go backwards. I feel like he'd probably come to the club and be better than he was at the Dragons. Just I don't know, just a vibe I get about him.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I think you want to maybe take a Hail Mary. You could look at a guy like Paul Alamotti, who, is emerging at Penrith, and they, you'd think that they'd try to re-sign him, but hey, he's off contract.
We love a Penrith player too.
Maybe we can come in and blow him out of the water on Alamotti. Sure, he's, performing well and they don't have May, but Penrith do still have a lot of options behind Alamotti that they can lean on coming through. They're not going to get into a bidding war and overpay for a dude.
That is true. Moving on from sort of external recruitment and shopping players, we have 5 players that are going to be elevated to the top 30 internally. The first one that is not on a development deal is Luke Lauliti. For those who don't know Luke, he can conceivably play anywhere between positions 1 to 5. Fullback is his preferred position, but we think he will come into grade via the wing. He's been performing reasonably well in State Cup, but last week was a pretty poor game by his standards, which we'll touch on a little bit later, Mac. But I guess my first question for you is he deserving of a top 30 contract for next year, given his current trajectory? Do you think that he will be, at that point, worthy of a full-time top 30 deal?
Yeah, man. Like he had a rough game, but it was his first ever game in open grade on the wing. He's performed really well at fullback. And the whole side were terrible. So I would bin that largely. He's talented as like he's a Australian schoolboys as a year 11 kid. He's got a built-in combination with Lockie. Yeah, I'm fine with him coming to top 30. I think he'll be a star of the game. He's very good.
Very good then. Four players that are on development deals that are being upgraded are Kit Laulii, the lock forward, who was our captain for our 2022 Harold Matthews Premiership winning side. We've got Chris Fangutu, a former Queensland under-19s Origin representative and a very decorated schoolboy footballer. Solomone Sakuru, who was originally from the Bulldog system. We poached him and his dad, Joey, and his brother, Apizalomi. Joey is now our SG ball coach. Solo made his New South Wales Cup debut on the weekend and didn't necessarily look out of place. And finally is Tony Suka, who was a decorated junior rep player for Balmain. He's played a bit of everywhere as old Tony, but started sort of in the centres and went through the front row, but is now sort of finding himself parked on an edge a lot of the time in New South Wales Cup. Mac, looking at those four players, I have my concerns, and I think that they're probably taking up a little bit too much, not necessarily cap space, but roster space. Are there any of these guys that you think are worthy and can make a step up to be a genuine top 30 NRL footballer from 2025 and onwards?
Maybe Solo. I think that like the other three, I think they're all going to be NRL players. I just think that like the speed with which that Fangutu, Kit, and Suka have developed is not the speed with which would justify them moving from development now to top 30 next year.
Yep.
I think that like a lot gets read into the fact that like Kit and Fangutu keep being moved around and have even played some Ron Massey Cup this year. And I think that there might be a bit of an underestimating of the role that the Ron Massey Cup side is actually playing in the development of these kids. I think it's actually quite intentional that they keep moving them in and out of that. I think they're intentionally playing them in that grade because they're playing against men. And I think that Fangutu played in Ron Massey Cup last week, scored 2 tries. Like he goes to that level and he's way too good for it. He's not shining in New South Wales Cup, but in flag, he's our best player. So he's just not developing fast enough to really, push into top 30. No way. But like another year of development, I'd be fine with. Kit, similar. I think Kit's probably actually performing better than him in New South Wales Cup, but
agreed. But even then, hasn't been performing to a super high standard.
Suka, it's hard to say because he's been out injured most of the year. So like he was a bit soft, like but he's real willing. And the other thing is Suka has been a couple of years in a row where he played in the preseason in the NRL and he looked good every time. So he might be one of those guys that like performs at the level that he gets pushed up to. So again, but look, to summarize it, I think we have better kids at the club that I'd rather push into the top 30. Like if we have to push kids into the top 30 next year, they would not be Solo would be one of the 4. The other 3 I would not be pushing into the top 30.
Right. So therefore, is it as simple as walking back those deals and placing them on train and trials? I mean, this is tough to do. It's not uncommon, but at the same time, like
it usually means them leaving.
Yes. Is it? Do you think it is in West Tigers' best interest that these guys find new homes?
I would prefer to keep them because I think that especially the likes of Kit is like the leader of the gang of that Magpies crew. So Kit has a cultural, he's Luke's brother. He was the captain of the Magpies team that went undefeated. He was the captain at Westfield. Like he's the man. So I would want to like I think there's like a cynical reason to keep him around. But I would rather keep them all. Like my first goal would be, all right, guys, like we want you here, but we think you need another year of development. I feel like you'd probably get away with it if you did. But if another club comes in and is willing to give one of those guys a top 30 deal, you're going to lose them. And yeah, you lose them. Like you would just take that at this point. Like if another club is willing to put Chris Fungutu on a top 30 deal next year and we want to revert him to a development contract and we lose him because of that, so be it, I say.
Fair enough. You mentioned something about certain kids that you would be more inclined to promote to the top 30. I'm of the opinion that if we were to let a few of these boys go that are being elevated, that we would bring in, experienced NRL players. That would be my preference. Guys like Tepai Moroa and Joe Stimson and so forth, the guys that are off contract that I think you could bring in on minimal dollars, and I would prefer that. Similar to what the Dogs did with their recruitment drive late last year. But if you were to bring some players through for, playing devil's advocate for the sake of this conversation, who are you looking at that you think is probably worthy of a full-time deal?
Yeah.
That isn't on one.
Well, firstly, there's a couple of guys that are off contract that I think are proving themselves worthy. Number one would be Sione Fainu.
Yes.
He does not have a contract for next year right now. So like I cannot possibly understand why we would have Chris Fagutu as top 30 next year and not Sione Fainu. So like the first things first would be solving that. But I think that there have been, I'm not even 100% sure what like Alex Lobb, Solomon Alamalo's contract statuses are for next year. I think Alamalo's off contract.
Alamalo's off contract. Lobster's got another year on development, which is actually decent.
That's a blessing. So you leave him there. But Alai Malo, sorry, I don't even know how to say it. Alai Malo.
Yep.
I would rather him be extended than Salkuru be put into the top 30. I think Alai Malo is more NRL already and is proving that. But in terms of young guys, I think somebody like Lachlan Brodelo has kind of emerged as a much more NRL ready prospect than any of those forwards that are on the top 30 next year. If you're gonna, I agree with you though. I'd rather bring in seasoned talent to fill those depth spots. I'm assuming that we might not be able to, and if we're not able to, I think that we've given these dudes top 30 contracts based on what they looked like as high school footballers. And I think that we've maybe underestimated the importance that the flag pathways have played in that. And I think that there are some guys in the flag team, and Lachlan Brodelo is one of those guys that has emerged that way. But there are others like Herman Toiafono, I think he's.
Toiafono, I think.
Yeah. He is somebody who is week in, week out, like one of the best players in our flag team. I think that, he's somebody who you could potentially look at, but most definitely Brodelo and, even like another guy that's been performing well that's sort of he came from the Bulldogs flag team via on Massey Cup into our
Tim Johansson.
Is Tim Johansson. I think Tim Johansson and Lachlan Brodelo have both surpassed Fagutu and Laulili. And if you're a meritocracy, if you're picking like who's going to be in the top 30 next year off of who's performing well now, how do you pick them behind those two?
Can't disagree with you, mate. Johansson was amazing in that cup debut of his against Newcastle. Came off the bench and ran for 150 metres.
Yeah, he was nearly man of the match in the Jersey Flag Grand Final for the Bulldogs last year.
That's right.
So he's a really underrated acquisition.
I think you are absolutely right. My next question to you is, does the clean-out go far enough? We've mentioned those 5 players plus Isaiah that are potentially on the chopping block. We don't know for certain. My issue is that in the top 17, you have 3 players that have very, very similar output. They are David Clemmer, one of which we think he's being shopped, Alex Twal, and Alex Seyfarth. How do you see sort of the roster clean out? Are they shopping the right people? Is there more people that need to be shopped around? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think that like it's silly because like we don't really know. Like we're only taking the word of like NRL media jerk offs that talk shit constantly for a living. The truth is like he's probably shopping other people too. Like you say, like Twal and Clemmer have similar output. Twal is probably an easier contract to move off of because Twal is not as on the same amount of coin as Clemmer. We would probably have to pay less freight to get rid of him. And it's not just about salary cap room, it's about roster spots. So like, you know, if it's coming down to the fact that we want to like free up a roster spot to make another signing, like if somebody's willing to take Twal on full freight or Clemmer on half freight, you're losing the same player essentially. So for me, I don't necessarily think that the truth is that they're the only five that are being shopped. It's really just going to come down to strategically what Richo thinks the team composition needs to look like. Somebody like Stafford Toa, you know, he's had one good game and everybody acts like he's like a mainstay and a real standard center. I think he's overrated at this club. He's a good player and he has potential, but what's the best form of availability, Reedy? Like availability, right? So like it's yeah, to me like Toa is another one who they should be looking at potentially moving on from. But I guess Twal and Toa also both only got extended last year, so maybe there's something to do with it.
I'd be holding on to those two for the most part. I think a guy like Josh Folletti, I know we've sort of spoken about him before, but with Solo Sakura coming in, I think they're two very similar players that probably need to be assessed.
I like Sakura because of his utility value. I actually watched that New South Wales Cup game, and unfortunately, we're running out of time, and we do want to touch on that Cup game briefly. But Sakura looked like a very good prop playing on the wing.
Yes. Yes, he's amazing out of yardage. And for that reason, chances are he's probably going to be fast-tracked. And he has kept his spot for a second week. And that brings us to right now our pathways / Jordan Miller watch. Mate, I didn't get to watch this game. I saw some highlights and some bits and pieces. From what I could see, there were some decent individual performances by the likes of Talender Silva and Jordan Miller. But for the most part, those individual performances only lasted 40 minutes until Blacktown just ran ragged and scored an incredible amount of tries in that second half.
Yeah, I think that they scored 12 tries and Humphreys only kicked 3 goals. So that scoreline could have been a lot worse than 50-30. Look, it looks like on paper like a game of two halves, but like honestly, it was more like we were defensively fragile from the get-go. It just took them a while to get their passes to stick. Like the first 4 sets were almost like boom, 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 up, down, up, down, up, down, and just both sides coughing it up at the like death. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like what the difference between the two sides was it was that typical men versus boys game where Blacktown had so much NRL experience. Like their pack had one player that hadn't played NRL in it. And they had like Jake Arthur, Jackson Palo, and who's the other one? Aaron
New South
Schott.
Wales Cup god Clayton Fualalo.
Oh yeah, him too, and he scored 4 tries. But Aaron Schott had his debut for
He did
them
too.
as well. So like they were stacked with NRL quality players, and yeah, you know we were leading at halftime, but we were 3 tries to 4. Like we were leading because of goal kicking, and mostly that their passes weren't sticking. To me, it looked like our defensive systems completely failed, but they had the experience edge. In through the middle, we were all right while Fainu and Miller were out there. When they went off, we were just shocking through the middle. The edge that was like Luke Laulili, Solomone Fatape, Noah Ryan, and Lachlan Brodelo was atrocious. It was just targeted over and over and over again. They scored like 8 tries down that wing.
But the amount of real estate that I saw on the highlights,
yeah, they were over
it was
compressing.
like from the tram line, there was open pasture. I've never seen it before.
Yeah, a lot of it was like, I think it was defensive system. Like, so they were compressing, but then not defending as an aggressive line. So there was a couple of times where Luke tried to sort of rush up to cut the play down, but he didn't really know what he was doing. He rushed up, sort of half went for an intercept. It was very Nofaluma looking.
Yeah.
But look, on the flip side, the positives were they scored 30 points. So it was like a men versus boys game, but the boys looked like attacking weapons. And you would expect that. Like, imagine what you would expect a scoreline to be from like the New South Wales Origin under 18s versus the West Tigers NRL side. Like, it was like something like that, right? Where, the young guys were really good. Like we were threatening them constantly. If you look at the players they had to score 30 points against what's almost an NRL pack is not that bad when you're looking at a side that had essentially like no NRL talent in it. Like there was almost nobody in our side that had NRL experience.
AJ was our most experienced campaigner.
And he was the worst player on the park.
I reckon he's been told that he's not being retained.
I agree. He's fallen into a heap. I think that, yeah, you're right. Talon was great all game long. He was great. He's developing well. One thing that I've noticed though, that is highlighted in the New South Wales Cup, but it's happening in the NRL as well, is there's this recurring theme where the players that we're bringing in to the New South Wales Cup side via the flag team, via Ron Massey Cup, and in the NRL team via the New South Wales Cup team, they're outperforming. They're like all of the changes that are being made are working. Like the new guys coming in are doing a better job than the guys that are Declan Casey excluded. But like the new guys coming in are doing a better job. And to me, that that's good. That's solid science. But it makes me wonder what the hell they were doing to identify what the best team was in the preseason, because it seems like the top 17 genuine best NRL side and New South Wales Cup side are so far off what we ran out in the first week. So like I that's a little bit of an alarm bells ringing to me, but at least they're making the changes and the adjustments. Like at least they're seeing the problems and not sitting on them, which was something I hated about Michael Maguire's coaching stint at the Tigers, was he would just persevere week after week after week with guys that just had no chance of ever panning out.
Yeah. Quickly, Jordan Miller's stats. Shout out to Ghetto Tiger. I know how much he loves this segment. 46 minutes, so a little bit less than last week, I believe. 1 try, 12 runs for 106 meters, so a little bit less than the average carry. 1 line break, 7 tackle breaks, 1 offload, 15 tackles with 3 missed and 2 ineffective. So he did miss a couple, and from what I could see, especially having to defend To'ofafa Sipley, who had the game of his life. Jordan had some issues with lateral movement from what I saw, but at the same time, he's a work in progress and these things happen. Just quickly running through team list news. There's no Alex Lobb, no Sol Fatape, no Talon Silva, or no Sione Fainu. Josh Folletti's back, as is Declan Casey. Luke Lauliti and Solo Sakura will remain on the wings, which is great from a development perspective. But one guy that I want to give credence to and congratulate is Zachary Clark, Campbelltown Jr. And if I'm going to describe Zachary, he is just a fucking footballer. My best comparison to a modern guy would be a guy like Billy Magoulias, and that's not a knock on Zach. I think he's a bit more talented, but he can play 13, he can play 6, he can play back row, he can do all to a high click, he can kick, he can pass, he's got a beautiful sleight of hand. He's one of those players where he's not necessarily your structured archetypal, back rower or lock forward. But my God, he has a bag of tricks and he shows it. One thing with Zach, his biggest issue is defensively. But at the same time, if you could tie those up, I think he's an amazing point of difference and will show as such on the bench. What do you think about Zach? I know how much you love him, actually, Mac.
Yeah, he's a great player. Every time I've seen him play, which, in fairness is not a huge amount of times, but like I've seen him play at least once or twice every year going back to like 2020. And he's always been one of the best players on the field. Like he's a very consistent performer. And yeah, you're right. Like there has been a game here or there where like his defense has really let us down. I think like we almost single-handedly lost a really important game last year in SG Ball because of his missed tackles. But he's like, to me, like he's like Lachlan Galvin, like he's like a very similar kind of player, like especially when you see Galvin as a back row, which obviously most people listening to this will have never seen. Zach plays back row like Lachlan played back row, very similar. And it makes sense because they're both like, halves halves
They're
translated.
they're an early ball back rower where you can sort of play shapes off. You can run block shapes, or you can run short sides with them. There, they can do a bit.
They're also Bateman-like, where they sometimes will take the ball as a back rower and just start trying to like become a running 5'8".
Yeah, go against the grain type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, mate. Anything else you want to touch on before we?
Yeah, I've only got a
part
minute left.
ways?
I'll probably just quickly touch on Flegg. You know, they had a loss on the weekend, but they're still performing quite well. They're probably higher on the table than I think that they should be. I think that like we need to look at their coach, because their coach must be doing something right.
That's one of the few good things that Scott Fulton did at West Tigers was
bring
employ
that
a
guy over.
coach. Yeah.
Nav Willett's starting for the first time
I think he
this year.
started last week. Don't quote.
Oh, he's just wearing the 15. Yeah, okay. They've got a strong looking side this week. They've got Matai, Fagutu, Vaihu, and Tumith all playing in Flag, who have played plenty in New South Wales Cup. Will Craig is missing, maybe hurt or suspended, I'm not sure. Shout out to the Ron Massey Cup and Sydney Shield teams. RMC, second, Shield first. Shield put 70 on the weekend. And I really like the role that those two clubs are playing in our development pathways this year. It's good to see them actually involved in the system. Jimmy Nutlick finally played.
Oh, like Taxi, he's back.
Off the bench in Sydney Shield and scored a meat pie. He's there again this week. So too is Will Malloy, who is the reigning Balmain SG Ball captain and players player. Very good player. First time I've seen him in open age grade, and I think he'll be very good. I actually think that next year he'll probably be in the New South Wales Cup side and he'll probably perform well. And I don't know why, but Kristen Manayama is back.
Oh.
He's back.
Wow.
Yeah, he's on the bench in the Ron Massey Cup this week. Former top 30 contract at West Tigers. So welcome back to him. But
what a great contract that was.
Yeah, great contract. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. I got a jet. So thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you for everybody who listened. Thank you, Mac. We'll be back next week with a game to preview for the NRL. Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoyed.
See ya.